This is a picture of what? Well, you're not here, so I can't really ask you that, but I'll ask it anyway, just like you were in class. It's a picture of a brain, okay? People kind of get that because there's a couple of ears here. And there's a front of the brain and a back of the brain, and it turns out that this is the front. So this is a picture of a brain. I ask people a question, is it the same person or a different person? And they're all pretty good. They say, oh, look at the geometries, it's the same person. So it's the same person, it's not different people. And then I ask a different question, is this person doing the same activity or a different activity? And they say a different activity, because obviously there's a same person, different activity because of a different brain pattern. Guess what? It's the same activity. What could possibly be different? Well, I don't have a lot of time to sit here and just vamp. What is different is the state of learning. This is what happens when you're learning. This is why you crinkle your forehead and you put your hand over your eyes and, well, about now I've shoved so much stuff into the front of your brain, you're about to go, oh, I've had enough. And I haven't had a chance to really learn that yet. That hasn't migrated back to become habit. So Pete Behrens gave me this example and talked a little bit about his version. And by the way, in some circles, this is called a Shu-Ha-Ri, the Aikido mode of learning. When I learned to ride a bike, I focused on pedaling, and I pedaled right back into the back of my dad's station wagon. Boom, crash, hurt. Certainly a lesson learned there. And then I realized, well, that's not really good because there's stuff out there that can hurt you. So I practiced some more, and I got to the point where pedaling was no longer a problem. I didn't have to think about pedaling anymore, but I could think about stuff that could hurt you. And Pete's an object-oriented thinker. So when he thinks about, I ran into my dad's station wagon, that's one kind of object. But because he's an object-oriented thinker, he might also think about a tree, because a tree is an object, in this case, of the same type. What type is that? The type of large inanimate object that can hurt you if you ride your bicycle into it. So now he recognizes trees and other bicyclists and all kinds of things. Well, as his skills progressed as a rider, as he learned to ride more and he became a fairly proficient rider, he might think about racing. And now he recognizes all the types of inanimate objects that can hurt you. He recognizes his level of hydration, his level of fitness. Pedaling is really not an issue. He knows he has the muscular strength to complete the race. And let's just pretend like he's in a race and somebody comes up behind him. How did he know at the beginning of the race who that would be? There's no way to know. So consequently, he has all this brain power available to start thinking, what do I know about this guy? Is he a strong finisher? Has he finished before? What are the tricks of the trade? Does he accelerate at the finish? Does he do that weird trick where you go slow and then fast? What is up with this guy? All these capacities are available. But if he's in this mode, he's still worried about avoiding the tree. If he's in this mode, he's still worried about pedaling. This is the learning mode called Shu-Ha-Ri. Do the basic practices, right? Inculcate those practices and advance, right? Become the master. Well, here's the problem. We've had you for 7 or 8 hours so far, if you've stuck with us to this point. This learning journey is not a 7-hour journey, right? This is a journey that's measured in months and even years. So how are we going to help with that? Well, the best we can do is offer some options. And I personally hate this slide, but my teams remind me that I don't often teach this slide. They do. But what is a Lean Agile leader? A Lean Agile leader is a lifelong learner by definition. They're reading a book. I have a book in my bag. My entire team has a book with them right now. And they help teams build better systems. How? By understanding the values, principles, and practices of lean, systems thinking, and agile development, product development flow as well. That's what we need. So here's some tips. Here's our favorite Lean Agile leaders reading list. I'll go through and list these and then come back and highlight a few that I think are particularly interesting. Some of you may have heard of my favorite book in this space is from one of my mentors, Principles of Product Development Flow. Not an easy read, but a really great read to really understand the principles. I mentioned The Lean Machine, the book about Harley Davidson, really a fun book. Lean Product and Process Development, we've quoted Ward quite a bit. The Goal, Theory of Constraints, Deming's Out of the Crisis, Agile Software Requirements, that's the deepest textbook currently available on SAFe. Switch, How to Manage Change When Change is Hard, and the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. There are others as well. Start a book club. We have a book club. My next book club is actually on active training. So be a leader who who does read, who shows others that they do read, not with a really nice bookshelf at the back with no books open. Have a book open, have it with you, and encourage others down the same path. And together, you will learn and grow together. So here's some homework for you when you think about leadership and building high-performing teams. Go to YouTube and watch this fun rugby video with the All Blacks, New Zealand All Blacks. Pretty amazing story there. Maybe you can even look up some other All Black videos where they do the haka and really exhibit teamwork. Specific reading on your list is this very short but very powerful 1986 Harvard Business Review article called The New Product Development Game. Very important reading. And what you're going to take away from that reading is some surprising things. One of the things that you're going to learn about building high-performing teams is built-in instability. What does that mean? How can I have a high-performing team in a highly unstable environment? That's part of what makes them high-performing. Living your life on the edge of the seat increases your skill sets. It means I can move to this other initiative. I can change very quickly. I can adjust to a different team or a different construct. Self-organizing project teams. Wow, 1986. By the way, this article is the roots of Scrum. This is what Jeff Sutherland sent me to when I was trying to understand Scrum a decade ago. He said, this is where we got a lot of our insights. And this is where the rugby game was used as an analogy for the first time. And that's where Scrum started. So self-organizing project teams, is that unique to Scrum? Well, perhaps so, but it certainly was also unique to the new product development game. Overlapping development phases. Well, what do they mean by that? Well, what they mean by that is not waterfall. They don't mean, the requirements, design, code, test, validation, and ship. They mean a little bit of requirements, design, coding, validation, shipping all the time. Wow. So they express right there in 86 the nature of concurrent development. Pretty cool to find this stuff. Multi-learning, right? Organizational learning, E skills and T skills, the ability for teams to, know plays and invent new plays in advance as a means of improving their skills. Organizational transfer of learning, communities of practice, ways to work together that assure that everybody gets smarter together. And lastly, subtle control. And I'm going to come back to that subtle control in a second when I tell you a story about some of my experiences in introducing Agile in the large enterprise. Let me talk a little bit about some of the learnings from the new product development game. And I recognize that these words are all abstract and they represent theories and practices that many of us haven't experienced. And it's kind of tough to sit there and just hear it and translate that into real action. Let me describe my experiences, at least one of my experiences that really brings the new product development game home to me. I'm just going to highlight a few of those bullets that we saw there. Built-in instability, that seemingly odd duck about building a high-performing team is assisted by built-in instability. It seems kind of odd. Self-organizing project teams puts fear in the heart of many managers, certainly those of us who are used to assigning people to work and have the experience of saying, here's the work, that's your project, you work there. That seems pretty difficult as well. Organizational transfer of learning, how quickly people can share the learnings across teams, across programs, across the enterprise, and subtle control, this interesting one, and it has an impact back here to built-in instability. So, true story. One of my first experiences with Agile at scale was a firefight. I mean, a big firefight, a program that was in serious trouble. It had not been able to deliver. It still couldn't deliver. They were quite reluctant, frankly, to move to lean and agile methods. They came to a point where they weren't going to deliver anyway, so why not try something new? And I got involved with an engagement to help them. Well, so we were going kind of all in. We were essentially going to build, in today's terms, a single agile release train overnight and convert that program that had about 100 or so folks into Agile. Now, there were certainly some people in the enterprise already that had experienced Agile development, but mostly they hadn't. This is a big kind of complex system manufacturer, and they had used traditional product development life cycles, traditional waterfall development. The system would be ready, the software would be ready, we'll match that all up at the end, and it simply wasn't working for them. So we then had the responsibility to institutionalize and implement, let's just say, a single agile release train in the scope of the enterprise. So what did we do? We said there's a date certain, and what are we going to do? We're going to do our training and our PI planning, in this case an actual release planning session, all in 1 week. Well, how do we do that? Well, they aren't agile teams. We needed to create them. So the managers worked with their teams and were they able to talk to every single person? No, we were moving very, very quickly. But we set up a room, a large room suitable for training, and there were 2 entrances to the room, and on each door was a roster, and the roster said, "You sit here. You sit here, you sit here." And people would sit down and they would have a Scrum Master placard in front of them, a product owner placard in front of them. And people are bright people for sure, and they'd heard about this, but what's the role of a Scrum Master? So they literally left whatever their comfortable environment was, went into the training room and sat down with a new team. And we had a lot of funny looks there. We had people going, "I'm a Scrum Master, what's that?" Others are going, "Well, my boss talked to me about that, I'm going to try it." Other people are going, "I'm a systems engineer. What's that have to do with product ownership? I don't own the product." Well, we're just going to have to work through it. So obviously, we're in a situation where they have tremendous built-in instability. I mean, this is culture shock to the max. People are now sitting with people that they've never met, and that's their team. How is that going to work? So we start down the process, and I start with the training. I teach Agile at scale to 100 people at the same time. For those of you who haven't done that, certainly we have people who think that's a kind of a silly plan. I really encourage it, because the value is not simply how much training or experience an individual can have in the method, it's how can the team and the program come together as a social network to deliver value. So if you're optimizing for that, having them all together is a lot easier. Not to mention, what choice did we have? Train one team each of the next 10 weeks? The deadline is only 15 weeks or so away. That really wouldn't work. We didn't have a choice. So we found this path as the only path we could come up with. So we start training. And I'm training away, and I stand up front like I do here and talk too fast for most people and slow down on occasion. And I look in the corner, and there's a guy over here sitting right next to me. This. Really unhappy. And look around the room, and there's a bunch of those folks. So there's these pockets of unhappiness, and clear as heck. And for those of you who have trained and worked with large groups, you know when you have people's attention and when you don't. So at break time, I went to management and I said, "We have some people that are really unhappy." And they said, "Yeah, we know that too." And I say, "What about these folks?" And they said, "You know, those are some really good people. We really depend on them. So maybe we've done a poor job of communicating. Maybe there's something wrong with this system. Do whatever you think is appropriate." So at break, I went over to this individual here. We'll call him Jim. And I said to Jim, "How come you seem unhappy?" And Jim totally laid into me. I'm the crazy man from outside. I don't understand the context. He spoke in phrases that I can't repeat here for sure, and made it clear to me that this was the stupidest thing that he'd ever been involved in his whole 15 years at this company. I said, "How come?" And he said, "Well, I'm engaged in a project right now. We're going to deliver this thing. And the way I understand it is that project is now owned by that team. That team doesn't actually understand the code base. I'm literally weeks away. I've been working on it for a year. I can finish this in 2 or 3 weeks and deliver the project. They're going to struggle forever. We're going to miss that deadline. You people are crazy. You're insane. I don't understand what in the heck you're thinking." And I said to Jim, I said, "Maybe you should go join that other team." And he looked at me and shook his head. "Okay." He picked up and walked himself over here. Said, "Hey guys, I'm back. I'm going to help you deliver this." Okay, we did that 2 times during the course of the morning. So we're starting to see people shuffle right from here to here to here to here to here to here to here. They're moving around. Now, in the end, towards 10:30 or maybe 11 o'clock, we're down to the point where we have a few people still really unhappy. So I went to management again, and I said, "I don't think we're done yet because these folks seem really unhappy." And they looked at the organization structure and they said, "That's okay. They were unhappy before too." That's subtle control. So this self-organizing and self-managing thing is not a chaotic process where people just work together because they want to. They might form themselves around components, common platform elements. We kind of know we don't want to do that. They might want to form themselves around known working relationships. That can be a good thing, but maybe that creates a situation where we're not really able to create teams that have equal velocities. There's a lot of ways they might want to organize that are not necessarily the same as the vision that we have. So what do? We have subtle control. We haven't abrogated our responsibility for outcomes. We haven't abrogated our responsibility for leadership, but we have different tools to work with to get a better job done now. What's built-in instability? Gosh, that seems kind of interesting. Key principle of lean. And let's translate that. Management provides a general goal and strategic direction, a strong vision. Reinerson's view of that is principle of mission. Specify the end state, the purpose, and the minimum possible constraints. Let the teams figure out the how, right? Give them the what, the purpose, and the purpose can be challenging, and minimum possible constraints. Little, minimum, no specific work or project plans. We don't design the work for the teams. We don't sit there and say, I think we could build it this way. Here's the Gantt chart that we created for you. Instead, it's you figure out the work and you figure out the project plans. Challenging requirements, no problem there. We certainly have those in spades. A high degree of freedom as to how teams meet requirements. Okay, that's where our self-organizing, self-managing team with a few fixed rules, a system demo every 2 weeks, PI demo, and inspect and adapt. Those simple rules can be imposed on very lightweight processes, and that gives the teams a high degree of freedom. They can run Kanban, they can run Scrum, they can run kind of other hybrid agile methods as long as they meet the end requirements of continuous or frequent integration. And by reference, that article includes another thought, the power of Ba. And Ba is one of the few Japanese words I've chosen to bring along. And the reason is that we don't have a good English language phrase for that. But the best I can translate that to is as follows, is that we, the work, and the knowledge are all one. So that's what a high-performing Agile team looks like. Our team, the work we do, and the knowledge we gain, it's all one kind of gestalt. Well, how do we make Ba happen? Well, what is it? Dynamic interaction of individuals in the form of a self-organizing team. So right there, the energy that is Ba is driven from a self-organizing team, and the fuel of Ba is its self-organizing nature. So a big clue right there that self-organizing and self-managing thing that we discussed early on from the manifesto is a pretty big deal. That's where the energy comes from. Team members create new points of view and resolve contradictions through dialogue. Okay, what's that mean? They argue. It's okay to argue. They argue to think, and they come to agreement. And they might even have language like disagree but commit, to indicate that I'm not comfortable with that decision, but I will fully support it because that's what teams do. And the ability to resolve and come to terms and create a course of action they all agree to. How do we energize Ba, right? If Ba is the fuel of the self-organizing team, how do we energize it? Things we've talked about: intention, vision, interest, and mission. Autonomy, variety, trust, and commitment. We're going to see autonomy multiple times in this short lesson. Creative chaos via demanding performance goals. No problem there. Every team we're involved in certainly has demanding performance goals. The team is challenged to question every norm of development. That's what Ba brings you, is that if that norm isn't working for us, we should have the ability to change that norm. And finally, equal access to information at all levels is critical. We need to know what our teammates are capable of. We need to know why we're building the system, who we're building it for, what the intent is behind the system, why we're constrained in this area, when we can negotiate back out, when it's actually a fixed requirement, what's fixed and what's variable. We have to have that information. We're knowledge workers. Without information, we're starved. We make decisions that in hindsight appear to be silly. Here's a thought experiment. Do you remember being on a high-performing team? Here's what people tell me what it was like. They said, it was invigorating. It was challenging. I asked them, did you work hard? Yeah, I've never worked that hard before. Was it fun? Oh, it was a blast. It wasn't all fun. Sometimes it was really hard because we did argue a lot. We argued to think. But I've never been in a situation that we were able to accomplish that level of work. Here's a question. Doesn't everyone deserve that? If you're a manager or a leader, a team lead, or somebody that's on a team, doesn't everyone deserve that? Do we have any higher calling as managers and leaders than to help create high-performing teams? I think not, because those high-performing teams produce results for them. They produce higher employee engagement, higher senses of morale, and great outputs that the enterprise can leverage to its benefit. And if so, what can you do to help now? In your role, how could you think differently about high-performing teams? Maybe it's creating high-performing teams. Maybe it's creating agile teams. Maybe it's providing a higher degree of autonomy. Maybe it's creating advancing their workspace. Maybe it's throwing them together in a pod and seeing what type of working environment they create. I don't know, but you can. And what you can do to help them is one of the highest leverage things you can possibly do at this point. Help create a high-performing team.